Hey everyone, happy Wednesday and welcome to the Leadership Forum. This is the first one we've done on our new schedule. So, just as a reminder, while I wait for Marie to join us, the new schedule is every other week we'll be going live. So we used to go live weekly. We are now going live every other week to give you a leadership forum training around a different leadership topic. And the reason we changed this is because we are currently serving our Leader Up community members within our membership community. And we want to make sure that we're giving our paid community a lot of time and energy and attention. So we are doing additional trainings in there, and there is a wait list. So if you want to be a part of that community, you are welcome to sign up for the list and get more information about it when we're ready to open the doors. And we'll poke a link in the description of this live stream as soon as we go off the air. In the meantime, today's topic is going to be Today's topic is launching, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to launch like a leader and what that means. Hey, Marie.
Hello. How are you, Jesse?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. It's Wednesday.
Yay! Halfway through the week.
I know. I like Wednesdays too because that's when we get to hang out with you guys over here.
Absolutely. Yes, I was just going over the schedule changes as a reminder and
hmm
letting everyone know that one of the reasons we changed the schedule is because we're serving our Leader Up community, and there is a wait list available for that if you want to be a part of it and get additional trainings. And we'll put the link in
Exactly.
the description. But this week we're talking about launching like a leader, and this is a really topical topic, I think, because there are a lot of launches happening right now.
Oh my gosh.
Everybody is
Yes.
launching.
It's Launch Central. I think everyone knows that the holidays are approaching, and even though it feels like everybody just got back to school, breaks are coming. And so everybody wants to make sure that their offers are available ahead of everyone sort of tuning out for the end of the year.
Yeah, and that's smart, right? Because so many people also end up in the boat where they put off their launch until the last minute. So the fact that so many people are launching right now really lends itself to showing how we're preparing, which, one of the
hmm
things we're covering today, the very first point we're covering today are the biggest mistakes you can make during a launch. And these are definitely mistakes we've made in our own launches. Hey, Tanya. Hey,
hmm
Linda. And one of those mistakes is not giving yourself enough lead time. So seeing
hmm
people launch now is really, really encouraging, because if you're sitting around in December going, oh, I should launch this thing before the year ends, you might be in trouble.
Yeah, and I mean it can depend on sort of the culture of your audience or their environment. I mean, if you're um, if your audience is primarily people who don't sort of tune out around late November through maybe early to mid January, then cool, have at it. But then the other piece of it is, are you potentially stressing out any support team members or contractors or whatever that you have, and asking for an undue burden on them to say like, hey, can you get this done yesterday? Right. So I
Yeah,
think planning ahead, even if you are going to be going into a launch during sort of the holiday period, um, can only help you.
totally. And I think there's also something to be said for throwing things together quickly sometimes, because otherwise we
Mhm.
get stuck in that perfectionism habit. And really, it depends on your audience, like Marie said. So you might be able to do a soft launch tomorrow to your list and
Totally.
have it be really successful. Zero planning need to go into it. But if you're planning a larger launch where you're reaching out to potentially new audience members, that's when a little more preparation can go a long way, because you don't necessarily know how it's going to go. And a lot of the launch is going to be about really adjusting course as you go.
Totally. Totally. This is hilarious. Fall is here. It was under 100 degrees this
Oh
morning.
no, Tanya.
Oh, Phoenix.
You poor thing.
Such a scary place. Yeah, and I
Oh.
think what you were saying, Jesse, makes me think of the other. I don't know if I would necessarily call it a mistake, but just sort of a ugly surprise waiting to happen. that we've seen a fair number of times with just, friends, colleagues, peers, whoever, right? Um, which is not necessarily knowing how you're getting in touch with your audience. Do you have an existing audience that's like, how warm are they? Is this a group of people that you have access to through email lists that you've established or social media channels? How often do they hear from you now? Are they used to hearing from you? So, for instance, we've had conversations with people who they're like, okay, I'm getting ready to launch. I've got a pretty sizable list and they haven't heard from me in 19 months. And I'm like, they probably don't know who you are anymore, right? So I think that's a question to ask yourself. And so one more reason to prepare ahead is it's not the end of the world if your list hasn't heard from you in 19 months or whatever, but it gives
Mm-hmm.
you a little bit of time to warm them up, to be like, hey, this is who I am. If you're not interested, you can unsubscribe.
Yeah. Tanya is asking, how long is a reasonable time to plan ahead in your experience? That's a great question with a really annoying answer of it depends.
It depends on you,
Um,
right?
yeah. Yeah. So, well, it depends on a couple of factors. You is definitely a factor. What are your energy levels that you can maintain? What are your pieces that you need to get in place? Some launches are far more complex than others. For example, if you're running a webinar style launch, there's a whole bunch of tech stuff that you have to get kind of figured out. And so you might want a little more lead time. If you're doing something that is relatively quick and easy, you're launching to a warm audience, just your list, you've been emailing them regularly, they know who you are, that may require a shorter lead time. So a lot of it is looking at the complexity of the launch itself, and the other piece is looking at how much you can manage. And the kind of trick here is that you can actually go too far in the other direction and give
Totally.
yourself too much lead time. This is something that we did about a year and a half, 2 years ago. We had a launch that we were really excited about, and we started soft launching 6 weeks before the cart closed and very quickly got tired and still had like 4 weeks left to launch. So it was a lesson to us that, a lot of people do really well with long launches. They like to have a big window, not necessarily a big cart open window because that's not necessarily effective, but a big window to plan and get the materials out and do private reach outs and all of those things, whereas some people operate better under a tighter deadline. So a lot of it really is knowing yourself.
And knowing your audience too, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if your audience is really responsive to like fast action decisions, bonuses, whatever, like they already know you, they really love you, and you're like, here's a thing, and they're like, yeah, I just been waiting for you to offer something, and like they just buy immediately. Cool, you probably don't need a super long open period for your cart. But if it is a colder audience and you're getting to know them and you're warming up that relationship, then that could be helpful for you. And you can still add urgency from, bonuses that expire over time, et cetera. So, um, yeah, it really does depend. Absolutely. But
Yeah.
I think what we can do is give a little perspective with sort of using ourselves as a case study of what has gone well for us. So we're going to be digging into that here in a sec.
Yeah. So our most recent launch, all of you were here for, most of you at least, and that was our Leader Up launch that we ran at the end of August. So the way that we structured our launch and the way that we've structured most of our launches, not all, but most of our launches in the past, is that we started with a free challenge and then we led it into the launch period. And this works really well for us and works terribly for other people. And again, it's that whole
Not all
knowing
other
yourself.
people, just some people.
Not all other people, just some people, yeah. But it's that knowing yourself. It's the same reason we don't do webinars because that feels really stressful and heavy for us. Challenges feel really light. We love them because they give us an opportunity to interact with our audience and to reconnect with some of you if we haven't in a while, to see you make measurable progress throughout the challenge. And we know that the challenges that we put out there, regardless of whether you actually buy the products that we're selling into, that challenge in and of itself is going to help you move your business forward and move your messaging forward. And so we can feel really confident going into the launch knowing that the free content we're providing at the front end is going to help you regardless, and it's going to open a new door for you and your business regardless. So that has worked for us really well. That doesn't necessarily mean that a challenge into a launch is your strategy, but I think what you can take from that is find what feels fun for you.
Totally, absolutely. And that is probably going to take some experimentation, but also just knowing yourself and knowing sort of what your energy levels are and your time availability going into it, that can help you assess what might be a strategy that makes sense from the get-go, or just, what you've done in the past. So, chances are most people in this group have done some kind of launch. It may not have been huge, followed by an outrageous ad budget or anything like that, but like just, use your past experience as a guiding post going forward. But I
And track
think,
it.
yeah, for sure. And I think too, like, we tend to be really hard on ourselves, right? We talk about this in this group all the time, how like we're hard on ourselves when it comes to everything, right? And launches are no exception. And so take some time after your launches and even retroactively go back and look at your past ones, even if they were several years ago, and actually do some analysis, taking sort of your emotions out of it in terms of like, okay, what are the data points? How successful was this launch
Mhm.
actually in terms of income generated or whatever, right? Like, what were your actual conversion rates? Do you know? How do they compare to, industry standard or whatever you were looking for? The first time we ever did that, we found out that, oh, our conversion rates are actually like better than average. We thought that we just sucked at this, and actually we just didn't have as big of a starting audience as we needed to have
Mhm.
the number of people in, but the percentage of the people who came in was actually way higher than, we shared it with our mentor, and she was like, that was awesome, guys, actually. We're like, oh, okay, good to know.
Yeah, yeah, and we've seen this so many times, where someone comes back from a launch and they're like, "I did terrible," and we're like, "Well, have you looked at your conversion rate?" And they didn't. They actually did
Hmm.
really well.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times one of the mistakes that people make leading into a launch is that they set unrealistic expectations of themselves
Hmm.
without looking at the numbers. So a really good activity to do on the front end of a launch is to sit down and look at the numbers and say, okay, if I want X number of people in the program and I know I convert around, a certain percentage, how many people do I need to get in on the front end? And if
Yeah.
you have those numbers to work with, you're not setting up this unrealistic expectation of, oh, this is going to be $1 million launch, even
Hmm.
though I'm only launching it to 100 people.
Right. Exactly. And I mean, if you have conversion rates of 50% and you're charging, I can't math, whatever, a really high price point, like it may be, but um, A, that's a really high conversion rate. And B, yeah, that's probably not the price point that you're looking at. But I think that was one of the things that made this launch successful for us was A, we had like a total detachment from the outcome,
Hmm.
because this was really kind of an experiment for us and just something that we wanted to do for its own sake. Um, and B, we did have some numbers going into it so that we could kind of go into it saying like, okay, if we have, 100 people sign up for the challenge, then chances are probably 5 to 6 people will join the membership. If we have 200 people sign up, then maybe we'll double that. And we had some idea going into it. So that way it wasn't like, we kind of knew ahead of time what to expect. And if it wasn't working in terms of those conversion rates, because we do know our historic conversion rates, because we've done enough challenges leading into launches over time that we were able to say like, okay, so this, like the conversions aren't happening as fast as we wanted to. So let's try some personal reach outs, or like, let's just get creative, or like, maybe it's going way better than expected. Okay, cool. This is like something that we can take a look at and see what's going well. And actually, it
Hmm.
did go better than expected. And we did have, right around average, or I think a little higher than average conversion rates for this.
Yeah. And I think the reason we consider this our most successful launch is only a piece of it is attached to those numbers. There
Mm-hmm.
is more that we're attaching to it to call it our most successful launch, which I'll go into in a second, but first I want to get to Linda's question, which is,
Oh yeah.
do you consider doing a summit a launch? And then she clarified to say a list building summit. So yes and no. I would say what we're talking about right now is something that's leading into a paid launch. However, if you're introducing something new to the marketplace, technically you're launching that thing. So it's being just, so long as you're really clear on your goals, then you can consider it a launch if being in that frame of mind helps you to really get the visibility out there and really talk about the thing. We've done summits leading into paid programs before, and we've participated in summits that were just list building summits, both of which were successful in different ways because they had different targets and different goals.
Exactly. So
So,
let's talk about the success of this launch.
yeah.
Does that answer your question, first of all, Linda? So let us know if you need more clarification. Yes and no, it depends.
Yes
Don't
and
you
no,
love
it
that
depends.
that's always
Yeah.
our answer?
But that's really telling because one of the things that I hate about launching, not about actually launching, but about the concept of launching as it's presented to entrepreneurs, is that everyone seems to say that they have the answer. I was just seeing ads on my Instagram yesterday that were saying, oh, if you do this challenge, that like format that I came up with, you'll have a really successful launch. Followed by, oh, if you do a webinar, you're going to have a really successful launch. And like all of these ads are promoting, do this launch the way that I launch, and you'll have a successful launch. But that's not the reality because all of our businesses are unique. And if we don't give ourselves the flexibility to experiment and find out what works for us, then we're just looking to fix something or create something that has no basis in our reality. It's based off someone else's reality.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think too, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the mechanism for the launch is. It really doesn't. Like, you could be just as successful with a challenge, with a summit, with a webinar, with whatever. It's not about that so much as it's about having clear messaging. So we'll get into that. And it's about having, a customer journey that makes sense, building those relationships, actually answering like a real question and problem that people have. Like, that's the stuff that matters. And it doesn't really, at the end of the day, matter what is the tool for conveying that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the reasons our Leader Up launch was so successful was, yes, we had above our average conversion rate, and that was a huge piece of it, but it wasn't the biggest piece. The biggest piece was that when we started putting the launch together in earnest, which was probably about a month out, we gave ourselves, we had it tentatively on the calendar actually for June, and then we pushed it back several times because we wanted to make sure that we were launching in a time period that made sense for us and our energy levels, and that we could give ourselves about a month lead time, because that's about what it takes for us to write the emails and get the challenge materials together and hook up the tech and all of that stuff. And right at the get-go, the very first meeting we had to talk about the launch, we said that this is an experiment. It's a new program that we're launching, and it is something that we are going to practice being detached from. Because at the end of the day, our business did not ride or die on this launch. It's not where at the moment the bulk of our revenue comes from as a business. It is an opportunity that we have cultivated to really connect with you guys in a way that we feel is not just fun, but also really helpful to building your leadership platform. And we wanted to give it a try in a way that didn't feel heavy. And that's become sort of our litmus test over the years is, does it feel heavy? If so, why? And if not, let's go for it.
Exactly. So the detachment was key. Yeah, healthy detachment. And I think that's what this was for us. It wasn't I'm detached and like, screw it all. It was like I'm really excited about this, and like, I'm excited about it for its own sake. And I remember going into, I think another one of the reasons this was successful is that I remember going into challenge week, and I think both of us felt a little bit of like trepidation, because in the past we've run longer challenges, we've had longer cart open periods, and there's kind of this story that was building up or in danger of building up, which is launches are exhausting. And so we'd done some things to mitigate that, right? Like A, going into it with detachment, B, going into it with a shorter challenge period. So we had shortened it from 5 days to 3 days. We had shortened the cart open window from like 2 weeks to 1 week. So at the end of the day, it was really a week and a half of sort of like intensive being there to support people, to answer questions, to let people know about the opportunity to continue working together, et cetera. And we went into it, I don't remember if it was like the day before or Monday when we started, but we were like, okay, we are going to commit to just like showing up fully for the next week and a half until the cart
Hmm.
closes. And we'll hold each other accountable. And if somebody is feeling like not feeling it, like we can just say like, hey, remember, like this is just a week and a half. And also like, how can I support you? Back and forth to each other. So there were days where we, would flip flop our live streams or whatever because somebody was feeling more energetic than somebody else, or there were times when it's like, okay, well, how else can we do this in a way that feels like showing up? But making that commitment to each other and then holding ourselves accountable, this is something you guys don't need a business partner to do. You can leverage someone on your team, you can reach out to a biz bestie or whatever, like an accountability partner, and just let them know, like, hey, this is my intention. Can you just like check in with me for the next 5 days to make sure that I am holding myself accountable to this?
Yeah, absolutely. And we changed things. One of the other things that we changed was originally the on the fourth day we had a Zoom meeting with whoever wanted to show up to just talk about the challenge. Originally, we had planned on doing a training, webinar style, us giving more information. And we realized pretty quickly that not only did that feel exhausting for us on top of creating all the challenge materials, but it also felt exhausting for our challenge participants
Mm-hmm.
because if for any of you who have done our challenges before, they're pretty meaty. And we're asking you guys to think really deeply about your business. And so adding one more day of content felt heavy for everyone, as opposed to giving you a chance to reflect on the content you completed on the first 3 days. So I think that definitely helped. I think the shorter cart period definitely helped. And sort of going back to something I said at the beginning about the detachment piece, I think one of the things that we've learned over the years, and it really showed itself in this last launch, is that it helps to have multiple revenue streams in your business
Mm,
so that you don't feel like a launch, which has elements that are within your control and elements that are absolutely out of your control, is the make or break of your business. And we've had launches like that where we put all of our energy and all of our emotional commitment to our business into this launch. Like, this is going to be the thing. It's going to skyrocket us into the
yeah.
most successful business ever. We're not going to have to do any copywriting ever again, which was a stupid thing to want because we love copywriting.
Right.
Like, we just followed the shiny object and thought that the shiny object
Yeah.
was going to be the answer to everything, and then got really, really stressed when we didn't do some of the things we talked about earlier, like look at our numbers and figure out what made sense for our business. So in having built out multiple revenue streams in our business over the past 3 years or so, we're able to have these launches and not feel like everything is riding on them.
Exactly. I love that piece of advice. So, and I think again, it's important to look at this, look at your mindset around it. So we were talking about the mindset of detachment. Well, this is the mindset of the launch and of um, what's the word I'm looking for? Diversification, of your income streams. It's not something to be done out of fear. It's something to be done because you love it, and there's different ways for you to support people. So for us, I don't know that we could say that we love our membership more or less than we love our done for you copywriting and consulting clients. We love them both, and they're both sort of, it's for the same person but who needs a different kind of support at a different point in their journey, right? And so um it's one of those things where we approach that with a mindset of abundance and love and excitement as opposed to scarcity. So I think that's important to say.
Yeah,
um
absolutely.
Yeah, you want to move on to our final topic around this?
Yes. So we've so far talked about the biggest mistakes you can make during a launch and why our most recent launch, the Leader Up launch, was what we're calling our most successful yet for a multitude of reasons. And the last thing we want to talk about with you guys is how to make sure your message is crystal clear throughout your launch.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an important one because if your audience gets confused, they're not going to be as compelled to buy from you, to participate in the launch, whether it's the paid part of the launch where they're actually investing in your offer, or even the free part that you're offering. If they're confused, they're more likely to just sort of find something else to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So one thing that's important to do is to be clear on who it's for. This is, I
Mm-hmm.
think, the other reason why we feel like our launch was very successful, which is I think more than any time in the history of our business, the right people that we were trying to target specifically did sign up, not like in name, but like the people who had like these characteristics and were this
Mm-hmm.
point in their journey and needed this kind of support and found like this kind of service would be valuable for them. Those are the people who showed up. That's kind of who we were expecting to show up. And like every time somebody else would walk in the door, we would be like, "Oh my God, so and so joined!" Ah, like right. It was like a big party because like everybody was a perfect fit, at least as far as we could see, and everybody seemed happy. So like that was key. And I think it's because for the first time ever, like we had our own audience messaging like down for this launch. So we did a lot of thinking ahead of time. And in fact, how many times did we change the like challenge prompt itself? Like, gosh, probably 5 times. This is part of why we pushed it back too, because we like hadn't landed on the thing that those people needed yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so like this is key from the very beginning to say like, okay, let's work backwards. Who do you want in your thing? And what are some of the steps that they need to go through, or what is some of the stuff that you can like prepare them for ahead of time through
Mm-hmm.
some free content? And that was like totally critical. So like A, you being clear on who your person is, and B, being clear on what they need is essential for your clear messaging.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to actually conveying that information to your audience, it's really about making sure that they understand how this is going to help them. I mean, we are bombarded with so many ads, so many offers, so many things happening in free Facebook groups. It's really overwhelming for most people, regardless of what platform you're on and regardless of what your business is or your leadership platform is. And so by offering something that you know that they need and knowing that you're providing the solution, at least in part, through the free content that then naturally leads them into the paid product, you're not just being really clear with your messaging, but you're also giving your audience a reason to kind of pause and be like, oh, this actually might really help me. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do, right? We want to genuinely help our audience. We just, want to do it in a way that also supports our business. So it's about finding that balance between what do I give out for free, which I honestly don't think there's any such thing as like too much free content. Like on a high level, I think you can overwhelm your audience with
Yeah.
too much free content. And I think there's a place for curated content, which is usually behind a paywall, because then they get something more. They get more access to you and more guidance and things like that. But as far as the launch itself, it's all about building that bridge between your audience and yourself and making sure that you know their language, you know their struggles, and you are providing a compassionate pathway to their solution.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Yeah. I mean, that's the key, right? A compassionate pathway. This isn't a get out your wallet because scare tactic kind of way,
Right.
right? It all comes from a place of true leadership, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
developing other leaders and trusting people to be able to make the right decision for themselves. But that does require us to be able to inform them, right? And to make sure that they can
Mm-hmm.
make an informed decision. So, um, preach, Casey. I think the other piece of this to get figured out in terms of your audience is what is their journey, right? Like what is the path going to look like for them? So if you already know who your person is that you want in your program and you're clear on how you're going to help them with the free content and the paid content in a way that feels very in integrity for you. What does that journey look like? Are you sort of half drawing a map and expecting them to be able to figure out where to go? Or are you being very clear about exactly how they can tell you, yes, I want additional support. Yes, I want to sign up for your program.
Hmm.
So just whatever, it's going to sound like a broken record. I think that's something we hear so much from our clients and
Yeah.
from friends is like, oh my gosh, do they really need the link again to the sales page? Yes. Yes, they do. And it's not you being pushy, it's them cutting through the noise and being like, oh, yeah, I wanted to read about Jesse's thing. That's right. Because it's buried under 800 new emails now, and I don't remember where the sales page is anymore.
Right. And I think the other thing, point to make there is it's not up to us to make decisions for our audience. It's not up to us to decide for them whether they're going to buy or not. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not up to us to decide whether they want to have another email in their inbox or not. If they don't want it, they'll delete it or unsubscribe. And
Totally.
there's no need to be attached to their decisions. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's another practice of healthy attachment. When we start trying to mitigate our audience's actions and control them, it it leads to a lot less control in the long run and a lot of frustration. So I think that's really key too. And what Marie said about making sure that there's a pathway, you know, looking at that working backwards piece, starting at the end point and making sure that whatever your lead in for the launch is really ties together. So when we did our Leader Up launch, we had our challenge talk about, how you could assess where you were in your business right now and how you've evolved as an entrepreneur. And we knew that leading into our membership in September, we were going to be reading the book Show Your Work, and we were going to be applying the principles of updating your content so that it reflects where you are now. So the challenge led naturally to the next step, which was this book and the trainings that we were releasing within the membership. People could go off and do it on their own, or they could be supported on their journey through the membership. So there's a natural tie-in and a natural flow. It's not sort of trying to retrofit things together, so you end up with like this Frankenstein model that doesn't really make sense.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I think another example of a challenge into a launch that has been successful for us because of the clear messaging and the clear journey was our storytelling challenge. This was the signature story challenge that we actually created in collaboration with Carrie Severson, who is a storyteller trainer, and she, hey Angelica, so we worked together to create a challenge where the people who came in, they wanted to figure out how can I share my story, get a little bit more personal, allow myself to be human, but do it in a way that is actually going to relate to my business and help people understand how I can support them and potentially also grow my influence through being able
Mm-hmm.
to maybe even be published somewhere or be able to submit to a media outlet. Um, but really the first step was figuring out what that story was, right? And so through the course of the challenge, the three of us, Carrie, Jesse, and myself, we walked our challenge participants through the process of like A, identifying like what is a signature story, B, what is theirs, and C, kind of like what is the big picture of it, like what is the big shape of it essentially. And then finally, we actually started debunking some objections ahead of time because a lot of people were feeling pretty nervous around sharing something that personal within their business because it felt like you need to have like two things, right? You need to have like your business you and your like you, and they like shouldn't be touching. And there was a lot of like fear around that. And so we actually spent a whole day of the challenge on that topic. And then from there, we sold into our story writing hackathon. Basically, we're just in 2 weeks' time, we helped them actually write their story. They wrote the story. We provided some editing feedback, guidance, and also here are the great places. These are like media outlets you should definitely consider publishing Carrie has just like this encyclopedic knowledge of media outlets and was able to like make very strategic recommendations. And so it like totally flowed in together. It totally made sense. Like we addressed the stuff on the front end. Like I don't know what my signature story is, and B, I'm scared to share it. And then it was like, and literally at this point, all you need is just like somebody to be like, cool, it looks great. Here's a few recommendations we would make to polish it and submit it here. And that was, it just like it worked so seamlessly.
Yeah. Yeah. So working backwards is always, whether you're launching something or, creating content in your business or, whatever you are trying to do, working backwards is almost always the way to go about making sure that you have a clear customer journey. And if you're struggling to figure out how to start your next launch and how to make sure your audience understands what you are promoting and how it's going to help them, start at the end point. Get really clear on the benefits of the end point and work backwards from there. And make sure that in your messaging that you're putting out there around your, whether it's a challenge or a webinar or whatever it is that you're using to lead into your launch, make sure that those benefits are super, super clear and that you really are speaking to your audience in a way that doesn't come across as that sort of used car salesman stereotype, that really does follow those tenets of compassion. At the end of the day, we are all stepping up as leaders, not because we like just saying, I'm a leader, yay, go me, but because we care about helping others and care about helping to lift others up. And if that compassion shows through in your messaging, along with the benefits of whatever service you happen to be providing, that's when you're really going to make sure that your audience understands and wants to participate.
Exactly. And I think as a final note to end on is just going back to that really important point that you were making, Jesse, where I think a lot of us who do feel like we're compassionate people, we want to somehow influence the decisions of others because we're like, well, this is what you need. And like, I know this because I know you and I love you. And like, this is the thing that you need. Right. But like, remembering at the end of the day, like our job is to communicate, what it is, who it's for, the benefits of it, like what they're going to get out of it. And then allow them to make an informed decision and to not attach our own well-being, how we feel about the results of the challenge and the launch, or not challenge, sorry, the launch, whatever you're using as your mechanism, on them and their decision. They're adults, and part of raising other people to stand up as a leader is to not caretake them and not to take responsibility for other people's actions and decisions. So, you do you basically, right? And like take care of yourself and allow them to do the same.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can hold out the hand, but they have to take it. All right. So we've talked a lot about launching today. We've talked about biggest mistakes, why our recent Leader Up launch was our most successful yet, and how to make sure your message is crystal clear throughout your launch. Our Leader Up community is currently closed, but there is a wait list that you can sign up for if you're interested in joining us next round. And that is an opportunity for you to get even more trainings about how to grow your leadership platform and showcase your expertise and innovation and build your influence so that you can create the positive change that you're envisioning for yourself and your business and your community and the whole wide world.
And then one other announcement.
All the things.
We'll be putting an event here in the Facebook group, but we're usually going live every other week for this, but we are actually, one of us will be going live with a special guest next week to talk through a challenge, or excuse me, I keep using that word, a launch. Someone who truly is launching like a leader, allow her to pull the curtain back a little bit on the process. And so we'll be doing a little bit of a case study next week with our friend and business coach, Safia Satur. And so we'll be joined by her next Wednesday, the 26th. That'll be at 1:30 Eastern or 12:30 Pacific. So we'll be posting that. So please join us. And if you have questions for Safia and what her process has been like, I know she'll be open to that. And then if you're interested in learning more about the program that she is launching, of course, you'll have an opportunity to learn about that as well.
Yes, absolutely. It's all about creating your signature program. So if you've had that sort of in the back of your mind, definitely come and listen in with Safia next week. All right,
Exactly.
guys, thank you so much for joining us. We will catch you soon.